So, HOA, necessary evils.
I don't even know if they're necessary, honestly. I
The
can't say that
evil.
HOAs are
Just
necessary.
evil.
Evil. We will stick with the evil. And there's some pluses. We'll talk about some of the pluses, but I do want to start
Yeah.
off by talking about this story of a woman who lost her home over $400 in an unpaid HOA, which I thought was absolutely crazy and would not have believed it if it wasn't on the internet.
Mm,
Because you gotta believe
that's
it's on the
right.
internet. But
Yeah.
no, so I'll read this story really quick for everyone who wasn't aware, which was probably everyone listening to this, because I wasn't aware before I read the story. But there was a woman who in North Carolina lost her home after failing to pay a $400 fee to her neighborhood homeowners association. So she lived in a 3,300 square foot home, nice size home, and that home was later flipped. I'm not going to tell you how much right now because I want to get through the story first, and I'm going to save that for the end. So the issue began about 5 years ago. This story was actually written this month in April of 25, but the story started about 5 years ago when the HOA claimed that Sanders, who's the last name of this woman, owed $400 in unpaid dues. And so she said she never received the notices, but she did acknowledge that she owed the debt. And so in February of 2021, the HOA placed a lien on her property. And by April, she was told that she owed $1,200 and that foreclosure proceedings would start. And so she was thinking it was a misunderstanding. She ignored the warning. You gotta you gotta have some responsibility there, you know.
First mistake.
If you threatening to take
Third
my
mistake.
house, yeah, definitely the first mistake. Actually, that was probably first mistake was probably that 400 she didn't pay attention to, but that she knew she owed,
Mhm.
even though she didn't receive the notices. But in any case, she ignored the warning, and her home was eventually sold for $49,000. The new owner flipped the home for $850,000 5 months later.
Mm.
That is mm, that is something to get your blood boiling if you were the homeowner who lost your home for $50,000 and all of a sudden the person who bought your home just made $850,000 off of it. And this is after the pandemic. I mean, this is, toward the end of the pandemic, I should say, because, this whole thing started back in February 2021. But this is obviously after we've had the huge run up in home prices. Homes are worth a lot more. And to just go out that way. One thing I'll say that a lot of people don't know, but you know now that you've heard this story, the HOA can foreclose on your home. A lot of people don't know that. They think that the HOA can just be a nuisance. It can be something that is, a hindrance or whatever, but the HOA can foreclose on your home, and they will foreclose on your home. Most of them don't. I'll say that. Most of them don't. But if you owe money to an HOA and you don't pay what you owe the HOA, it works just like if you owe money to the county in taxes and you don't pay taxes, the county can have a lien put against your home, and they can sell your home at a tax sale to pay for the unpaid taxes. The HOA can sell your home through foreclosure to pay for the money that you owe the HOA. And so, yeah, this was actually a story that you sent me. So, I mean, how did you stumble upon it? How did you learn about this?
I get news break Atlanta, their daily emails, and naturally anything. I'm especially since I got completely off social media in December.
Hmm.
I used to get a lot of my news from social media, but it was like pop culture news, I been paying more attention to the news emails and anything that has to do with real estate or HOA or anything like that. I'm going to naturally gravitate more towards those articles. And I saw it, it's crazy, but that's, it's just something else for homeowners, I guess, to be concerned about, because, you would think, okay, if I don't pay my mortgage, I know I can lose my house. If I don't pay my taxes, I know I can lose my house. But HOA bills, now that's just another thing to worry about. But working in real estate, you have some buyers who are adamant, absolutely no homes in the HOA community. And I understand,
Hmm.
because, the reason why I call it a necessary evil is because when we're talking about protecting property values, they're not going to just let you park your dad's 1980 Ford in your yard. All these cars parked in the yard, trash
Uh,
scattered, they are going
yeah.
to fine you for these things. And so it
Mhm.
protects the property values, especially if you're in an area that may not have the highest rated schools,
Mhm.
or, that may not have the highest, you know, property market values. You know, but at the same time, yeah, they can tell you, you know, oh, you can't have this potted plant in your yard, or that's when it gets annoying.
Yes.
So,
I had a neighbor actually who, not had, I have a neighbor who was telling me about a former, a friend of his who lived in a previous neighborhood that had a HOA. They wanted to have a garden in their backyard. Their backyard's completely fenced in. You can't even see most of the backyard, but they wanted to have a garden back there. But they needed to submit plans to the HOA on what this garden was going to be, how big it was going to be, what they were going to be growing in this garden, the materials they were going to be using to lay out the garden bed and everything. Is it a raised bed garden? All of that stuff. They had to submit all this to the HOA to have a garden in their backyard. And so they started their seedling because they're like, of course, the HOA is not going to deny us. But it took the HOA like 4 or 5 months to get back to them with an answer, which by that point, the seedlings had died. We're past harvest season at this
growing
point.
yeah,
And it's, it's like, oh, so much for the garden, but thanks,
yeah, maybe
HOA,
next year.
looking out for the neighbors. I appreciate it.
Wow.
But
Yeah, the backyard part. Yeah, that's when it's encroaching on your, like, this is why people purchase rather than rent. Or it's
mm,
one of the reasons, so I get to do what I want to
yes.
do with my land that I have purchased. But I guess it's not that simple all the time. I have a listing right now in an HOA community, and they sent a contract, and we were almost under contract after nearly a month and a half on the market yesterday. And it was strange because the agent had called when they first called late last week. They asked about rental restrictions, and I'm one of those people. Before I even listed the home, I reached out to the HOA president and confirmed, is it, are there rental restrictions or not? Because people are going to want to know that.
Mhm.
Um, the HOA president wrote me back with the quickness, or it's like the president of the management company, right?
Mhm.
And she basically put in the email, leasing is prohibited. And the prohibited was not only bold, but it was in all caps, the word prohibited. Leasing is prohibited in this community, right? I was like, okay. And I knew that we may get some, inquiries from investors because it's one of the smallest homes. So therefore, it's one of the lowest price, let's say lowest price homes in the community, right?
Mhm.
So I explained this to the agent when she initially called, and I was like, yeah, no, leasing is prohibited. And so then she was like, okay, well, we're going to be working on an offer. Finally sent the offer in Monday. I called, and she asked me again about the leasing restrictions. I said, hey, I'll be happy to forward you the email that I got from the HOA managing company,
Mhm.
but there's leasing is prohibited. And I guess maybe 4 or 5 hours later, I call her just to check on some other terms that we were, trying to negotiate. And she's like, my client has decided to pull out. They've decided that they don't want to proceed because of the leasing restrictions. I was
Mm.
like, wow. And I was telling her, some people will bend the rules, they'll skirt around the policies. I said, now, do
Mhm.
I think 100% that this entire neighborhood is full of just homeowners? Absolutely not.
Nah.
Absolutely not. But you have those people who will bend the rules or who are not afraid to bend the rules, and then you have those that are not Now, based on what I know from people losing their homes over just a $400 fine,
Mhm.
I don't think that it would be worth it, depending especially on the value of the home. I don't think that it would be worth it knowing that the HOA can foreclose on your home.
Yeah, and they can't. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like if you're not abiding by the HOA rules and regulations, we're actually going to get a little bit into that. They can fine you, so they can foreclose on your home if you're not paying what they fine you essentially for, whatever they deem you're doing that's outside of their regulations. Because
Mhm.
there's some other stories out there where people have been fined, $1,000 or more by the HOA for trash in the yard,
Mhm.
for parking cars in front of your house or on the street.
Oh
Um,
gosh, yes.
all of those
Yeah.
things, and the HOA is fining people for that. As long as you pay the fines, then you're fine. Essentially, you pay the fines and you're good. But it's if you let those fines just continue to accumulate. Again, most HOAs are not going to put a lien on your house and foreclose on it, but it is within their rights to do
Their
so.
power. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now I wanted to I guess get a little bit into because I know we jump headfirst into the evil that is the HOAs. But there are one good thing about an
Oh
HOA.
gosh.
There's
I can tell
a
you
good
don't live in
things.
a community with an HOA. Oh my goodness.
I definitely don't need to now, because if they ever see this podcast, they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna find him, we're gonna take his house, we're gonna sell it for pennies. But no, it's there are some good things about an HOA. Some are better than others. I mean, they're run by people, usually residents that are of the neighborhood. So some are better than others. Some are more involved than others. Some have amenities. So you have some neighborhoods that have common amenities: a pool, a tennis court, maybe a exercise room or a gym or something like that, where people can work out. And having an HOA, the money that goes to that HOA helps to maintain and upkeep those common areas. Maybe it's even something like sidewalks and street lights. But all that stuff costs money to maintain and upkeep. Maybe it's just the nice brick sign outside your neighborhood when you're coming in that just has the name of your neighborhood on there. But even still, grass needs to be cut around that to keep the weeds off and everything else. So you have some stuff that, is beneficial for the HOA that goes to maintaining and upkeeping the common areas and, making sure that the pool is available for everybody to be able to use, and tennis courts and whatnot. And then you have some HOAs that don't have, or I should say neighborhoods that don't have all of the amenities. They don't have the pool, they don't have the gym, but there's an HOA. And in those situations, sometimes you're not very privy to what those funds are going to. You're paying into a HOA and maybe you just have nice sidewalks and some street lights. So there are some benefits to having a HOA, especially because, sidewalks and street lights do help provide a little bit more security, especially if you're someone who likes to go out at nighttime walking your dog and, or getting a little exercise, especially in the summer when it's nice outside at nighttime. That could be something nice to have. And living in a neighborhood that has a HOA can provide you with that, additional security. Having a gated community is another benefit that you could have of being in an HOA, where you have a gated community, and it's like, you have that extra sense of security. You've got, maybe your HOA hires a guard to stand at the gate, so that they're actually checking people that are going in and out. That's another layer of security that you're now getting with that HOA. And it's like, you know what? I feel really safe walking around my neighborhood at 10 p.m. at nighttime, 11 p.m. at nighttime, because we live in this nice community. There's 100% always a guard up at the gate. It's gated all the way around the community. We've never had any issues here. Street lights everywhere. One of those types of communities can really provide a sense of security. So there are some pluses to living in an HOA, which is why I think a lot of people do gravitate towards them, is for some of those reasons. And then there are some pluses that don't necessarily translate to a monetary thing. For example, if you live in by Ray Ray and JoJo who like to leave trash all over the place, you know, HOA can try to help clean some of that up. If you live by a person who don't like to cut their grass and they keep it higher than the front door, you know, or they just, you know, they keep their house looking less than par, and that those are things that could affect the property values of the homes, you know, adjacent to that home. And so being in a neighborhood with an HOA that's actually addressing those issues and concerns can help keep your property value at a more increased level. The more I'm talking about it, the more I'm like, wow, it really does sound good to have an HOA.
See?
Yeah, still not getting one though. Don't need no one telling me what color house to paint, what color I need to paint my house, or, you know, other stuff that I'm like, oh, you know, that I might want to do to my house. I want to build a deck or something, and I got to go to the HOA. But there are a lot of good things about living in a neighborhood with a HOA, especially if the fees are not quite as high. Yeah.
So when I first purchased my home, it was in a community with an HOA, and it was $150 every 3 months, so $600 a year.
Oh, okay.
But I guess maybe year 3 or 4, they finally actually built a playground. And they would try to enforce when we would like pull our trash cans to the curb and pull them back. I had an end unit, so it was easy for me to just keep it on the side of the house. But other people, you know, they would either have to wheel the trash can all the way around back, or just keep it like at their front door, which who wants to smell that, especially in the summertime coming out. So they tried to enforce that. Now there was another community by the same builder, maybe 5 miles away. Houses looked the same, but there was no street parking there. In my community, street parking was allowed, but the HOA really enforced street parking in that particular community. No street parking. But the favorite thing for me, this was my first house. I moved here. I refused to mow the lawn. It wasn't a big yard at all, but it actually covered lawn care. So once a week, especially during the spring and summer months, they would come and mow the lawn, the little patch of grass that I had in the front. They would also mow the back. Now, some people fenced their backyard in, which, I mean, I don't even think it was 100 square feet. So I never, you know, bothered to do that. Plus, I like to see what the people behind me was doing. When I looked out, I like to spy on my neighbors a little bit. What was that sound? You know, so I never fenced my yard in. But but yeah, if you fenced it in, then they wouldn't come in there and mow the grass. Okay. And one guy, no lie, his grass grew all the way up over the 6-foot fence, and I could see it. I was like, "Are those daisies? Oh my goodness!" But they were weeds. It was awful.
He was into gardening.
But you know, for me, it was worth the $50 a month for them to come out once a week and keep my lawn looking nice, because I cannot stand uncut grass. I get that from my mom. So, you know, there was plus. There are perks, I would say.
Gotcha. There are another one I was also thinking, and again, this is depending on the HOA that you live in, because some HOAs, again, the HOA committee is very involved. You have some HOAs that will plan events. Maybe they'll plan family events for, you know, people with children. Maybe they'll just plan a neighborhood event around the 4th of July, or they'll just plan a random cookout. And, you know, all that money that you've been paying them, they're buying food and chips and hot dogs and drinks and, you know, whatever. And people can come down and mingle. And it's a great opportunity for you to be able to come and meet your neighbors. And
the clubhouse.
Exactly. See? Yeah, that you paid for. So yeah, it's a great opportunity to meet your neighbors, because a lot of people don't know their neighbors. So that's another positive. So yeah, I mean, it's a lot of positives. I know there are some negatives that are out there as well, but I think overall, most people are fine with paying an HOA fee as long as they feel like what they are getting from the HOA. Exactly.
Yes.
Yep. As long as they have value there, as long as they have They feel like, what I'm the $50 a month that I'm paying is worth me, having sidewalks and street lights, or the $100 a month, but we have a gated community. Whatever it might be, they, as long as they feel like they're getting what they should be getting for what they're paying. I think most people are, which I guess is a good thing, because more of the subdivisions that are being built now are HOA subdivisions. They're not really building
HOA.
everything.
You can hardly find anything new construction that's not in an HOA. It's so annoying. It's so annoying, but that's kind of how Georgia is. And it's having lived in a different state before, I can tell you that, it's easy to find new construction in places that don't have HOAs in other states. But how Metro Atlanta is, I think that's just, it's the norm here now.
It is. Yeah, every subdivision that pops up, it's like, if they got HOA fees. There are actually some subdivisions, and I learned this actually, it wasn't too long ago, it was within the past year, that they have subdivisions that they build where you own the house, but you don't own the land that the house sits on. And so that's an actual thing where it's like you own the house, but you lease the land. And I was like, well, that's a business model for success.
Never get finished paying for that. You'll never own it.
No, you never own it. You forever are going to be leasing the land that you own this house. And obviously, since it's not a mobile home, it's not like you can just pick up and take what you own elsewhere. You have to sell that house. Yeah.
That's a good old business, man. Let me write that down.
Taking notes?
You're going to find somebody who will do it, because, housing is so scarce now. So
it is. And it's hard to find. I mean, one, we're in a housing shortage. It's hard to find affordable housing, because housing prices are, in addition to not having as much houses in general, housing prices are a lot higher. And I find there are a lot of people that are willing to just purchase anything to just have something that they can own, even if they don't own land underneath. True story. Wow. There's actually a home for sale, and I came across this home through an individual that I met who was actually considering it. That is the most that I would tell you in their identification. But it was an individual I met who was considering it. And this home was for sale for like just over $200,000. Yeah, just over $200,000, and it was downtown Atlanta. I was like, wow. Now, south of 20, if you know anything about Atlanta, there is a division of the places in Atlanta, but
backpedaling now on this way. Keep on going, brother.
Yeah,
keep on going. Let's see what you got.
I keep preaching. So it was a remodeled home. Essentially, it was like brand new finishes, fixtures. They slapped some paint on there. It looked nice in the photos and everything. And I was like, wow, they just remodeled this home. A little over $200,000, very affordable. And then I looked, this home was a little over 600 square feet for the whole house. And if you don't know much about square footage, that ain't much at all. I've seen bigger studios. My first apartment that I lived in when I got married, my wife and I, was bigger than 600 square feet. And it was one bedroom, one bath, one everything. And it was bigger than 600 square feet. So this was a whole house. It was independent of, it was not attached. It was not a townhome. It was a house, 600 square feet. And it was 2 stories.
Stop. This is getting more and more ridiculous. This was a standalone single family structure. Is that what you're telling me?
It was a standalone single family structure.
Hey, how big was the yard? Is there add-on potential?
It was not even a huge yard. Like, the driveway was about as big as what the yard itself was, because it had like had a little gravel driveway going up to it.
See why you want to protect this person's identity. Anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was one of those things where I was like, man, this looks really nice. How are they letting this go for, a little over 200? And this, oh, I can't even talk myself into paying 200,000 for 600 square feet. Like, this is insane. And it's 2 stories. I'm thinking that's got to be the joke. You found a way to split 200 square feet up into 2 stories of a home, and you got steps in there. Like, wow. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard times where
That mortgage payment, like I'm interested to know that.
So a mortgage payment, depending on your interest rate, and I'll actually pull this up right now. I'm gonna do it for 200,000 because I know people probably gonna try to go search the home. And you can go search the home. It was actually it was a little over 200,000, but I'll do it for 210. That puts us a little closer to it. But if you were to purchase it for 210 under an FHA loan, let's just say you get a 6% interest rate. Put property taxes in here. I don't know what insurance would be, but we're gonna go with on the low side
$12
insurance. So your mortgage payment would be about, with a 6% interest rate, you're looking at about $1,670.
Bye, Frederick.
$1,670. But you get
Bye, Frederick.
You get your own house. You can call yourself a homeowner. you get a whole 600 plus square feet. Call yourself a homeowner. I thought you were gonna say 11 or 1,200, something like that. No, it's 16 something, and no HOA. No HOA. So you can do what you want. You can paint that 600 square feet any color you want to paint it. You can.
No. I mean, hey, different strokes for different folks. The fact that somebody, an actual human being with a heartbeat in a brain, was actually considering this, I think is just reminiscent of the times that we're in. It's very representative of the times that we're in.
Yeah, it's tough, but I think that this is the direction we're moving in. I still think that if you're living in Georgia and you're buying new construction, it's going to be in a HOA. It is what it is, but I still think that it's better to own a home, even if in a HOA, than to not own a home at all. So you just got to be aware of the restrictions of the HOA, because like you said, some of them will not allow you to rent the house. You want to be aware of that. Some of them will not allow you to paint your house a color, any color. Some of them won't allow you to put up a fence. Some of them, if they do allow you to put up a fence, it has to be a fence that conforms to what every other fence is like in the neighborhood, because they have standards that they're trying to have all the houses look uniform. And so you just need to be aware of what those restrictions are when it comes to having a home that is in an HOA. So
I actually have some HOA horror stories from people that I've helped either get rentals or try to sell. I know one rental that I helped put a client in last year. I have an SUV, so I pulled into the driveway when I was showing it, but they didn't, and they both, drive cars. And so after moving in, they discovered that every time they would pull into the driveway, it would scrape the underneath of their car. So they started parking on the street. Rentals are allowed in this particular neighborhood, but there was an HOA. The owner started getting daily fines of like $25 because they were parking on the street. But they were like, we've ruined the underside of our cars trying to pull into the driveway. So they built a ramp, but eventually the ramp broke down. And so then the owner started charging them double what the HOA was charging them, or what the HOA was charging the owner, in an attempt to get them to move. And they ended up they broke their lease early, and they were like, this better not count against us. And that was actually one of those situations where that particular rental transaction actually turned into a listing, because the mom of one of the tenants was like, well, let's just move in and rent a home together, and then I'll sell my home. So it worked out. But this is the home that she wanted to sell. The mom wanted to sell is in a neighborhood that with no, strictly prohibited rentals. So, and then another one, there's a pretty popular community in Henry County, McDonough area. You know, the seller bought the home and obviously was not told about a special assessment that was coming up because the community is built by a lake, a pretty popular lake. But the lake was drained several years back, and now they want to refill the lake. Well, that's going to result in a $25,000 per home assessment, special assessment. And so for a lot of people who don't know, when an HOA wants to make major improvements and there's not enough money in the reserve, they're supposed to be taking your money and putting it away for later on repairs, such as streetlight repair, sidewalk, when there's potholes in the street, you know, things of that nature. But when they don't, you know, or when they're not collecting enough, let's say that, in HOA dues, because I think in this lakefront community, the HOA dues were like $500 or $600 a year, and the homes are all valued at $450,000, $600,000, $700,000 and up in this community, right? So it's really on the management company, but now they want to refill the lake. And so in order to escape the $25,000 assessment, you should see how many homes are for sale right now in that community. And the seller was telling me as the agent, nobody told me about the special assessment, so you don't need to put that on there either. I was like, oh, lady, you about to get me in court.
Oh, wow.
So thankfully, she ended up snatching the listing away from me because it wasn't selling quickly enough. And I told her that it was overpriced it was overpriced when we first came on the market, almost $300,000. We were $300,000 too high. I was like, it's not worth it. The bank told me, yeah, she said the bank told her that a house was worth a certain number. And I said, well, the market, the comps are saying.
Wow, $300,000 overpriced?
Yeah, we should have listed around maybe 625, and we were at 875 when we came on the market.
Wow.
So, of course, we didn't get not one showing. It was on the market over 2 months, not one showing, not even one phone call, you know. So it wasn't selling fast enough. And so she snatched it away from me and gave it to Mark Spain. People who know who Mark Spain is, you know, he says that he'll buy your home. But listen, you just have to go through the process with Mark Spain. I don't want to, you know, talk down on brother Mark Spain's business, but you're probably going to get a lot less than if you are able to just be patient and wait for it to sell at market price, because he's going to take his cut. And what he's selling to is an investor. He's not selling it on the market at a market price. He has a whole list of investors. And so, yeah, to escape the special assessment, a lot of people were putting their houses on the market, and they are not selling. One house is going pending maybe every 2 months. And there are, no lie, at least 15 homes for sale in the subdivision at any one moment in time. And this has been since November of last year.
And that's just because mainly this $25,000 assessment, and this needs to be paid all at once, or is this like you pay like $1,000?
Your payment plan about $4,000, broken up into chunks of four easy payment plans of $4,000. You know, sometimes you can add it on to like a HELOC. I think you can do that. You can put it on a credit card if you want. You can pay it all at once. You know, they give you several options, but there is no option to not pay it. A lot of homeowners, what they were doing is putting $25,000 in escrow so that, you know, as an incentive for someone to purchase it, which I think is the ethical thing to do. You know, that this is coming up. Don't have an unsuspecting homeowner coming in thinking that it's nothing, because that can mean the difference between somebody being able to afford their home or eventually losing their home.
Oh, absolutely.
So, you know, think about it, and those people can sue.
Yeah.
They can sue the agent. They can sue, especially if they found out that you knew. So I was never more happy to lose a listing in my life.
Oh,
I was like, thank you, God.
You don't need those type of problems.
No, I was like, don't tell people. Nobody told me. Well, you know, you don't supposed to return evil for evil, but you know, everybody don't live by that principle.
Yeah,
Everybody don't live by that principle.
not
So,
everybody reading scriptures. So
and definitely, my granny said, "What's the use in having a Bible if you ain't gonna do what it say?"
true. I mean, what else is going to collect dust in the house? Something's got to be there to collect all the dust
Mm-hmm.
that's falling so it don't get on your floor.
Yep.
But no, it's
Yeah.
yeah, it's wow. But I think what you said was key though, for the homeowners that are putting that 25K in escrow and saying, you know what, we're going to put this in escrow so that the next homeowner can have it paid for them and they can buy the house. And that's actually a great strategy. It's actually one that I would recommend people use as well if that was a situation that you were in, or you were moving into a neighborhood where maybe it wasn't 25,000, maybe it was a $1,500 assessment or $5,000 assessment that was going to be levied against all of the homeowners in that HOA. Having something where maybe the homeowner does set that money aside and maybe they try to recoup some of that back in the sale price of the home. So maybe you were going to list your home for 300,000 and then you've got this $5,000 assessment coming up. Maybe you list your home for, 302, and try to recoup some of that money back, or 303, try to recoup some of it back, or 305 and try to get the whole thing. But, whatever it is,
Okay. Give it all to me.
exactly. Just set that aside so that the incoming buyer, at least is not having to come out of pocket with that, because it's going to be much cheaper to finance $5,000, $10,000, even $25,000. You're talking about adding maybe I don't know, 170, 180 bucks, maybe 200 bucks, depending upon the interest rate that you're getting on that, and how much you're borrowing. You might add another, for 25,000, another 170, $180 per month to your mortgage payment. But if you don't have $25,000, you might be able to make another $160 happen for you, $180 happen for you. So cool.
Yeah.
Well, no, this has been good. Been good discussion on HOA, and I broke out of my shell of not about that HOA lifestyle, and
I
actually,
saw the light. The moment that the light bulb came on, the moment that you received your deliverance, I said, "You know what? This is just beautiful." We caught it on camera. He was like, "Well, you know what? Maybe it's not so bad." I knew it, but no, I mean, I think that it is an excessive. It's not an excessive cost, but it is an extra cost. But I completely and totally agree with you when you say that I have to be able to see the value. That's it.
Mhm.
Got to be able to see the value that I'm getting for it. Otherwise, I'm not going to want to pay it. And the thing is, you may not be able to sell your home quick enough to be able to escape a special assessment. That's not always, I know in that particular community, they actually overthrew the HOA board president. They had a very heated meeting. It was televised. It was all on the news.
Oh wow.
And yeah, they ousted the HOA board that was trying to, enact the special assessment. Now, did that actually take away the issue? Yeah, temporarily. But you have people who live by the lake who want water in the lake. They bought a house in a lakefront community and on a lakefront property because they want to have a lake view. But then you have others that were like my client, whose home was at the very front of the subdivision. She can't even smell the water, much more see it,
Mhm.
And she was like, why should I have to pay that? And so a lot of people were saying, well, the ones that are further away from the lake, why don't they have a smaller amount of assessment to pay? Why do I
Man,
have to pay, But I often wonder how all of that's going to work out. But you just have to be careful. And the good thing is you do have some sort of buffer or cushion or recourse if that happens. And then you find out that the previous owner or their agent knew. I think you would have some legal grounds to, recoup some of that money. So honesty is always the best policy.
it is. I completely agree with that, and it is not enough of it that goes around, I feel like, but it is definitely the best policy. And I have learned that lesson. This is just a sidebar in the mortgage industry. Thankfully, early on, before I'm like 2-3 decades into this thing, I learned it earlier on that being as open as you can with people, about everything, interest rates, cost. Let people know everything up front, because the one thing that really just causes people to leave with a sour taste in their mouth is feeling like they were blindsided about a fee that came up. It's like, oh, I had no idea this was going to be charged this. I had no idea this was going to be the case for this. And when they get blindsided, nothing rubs people the wrong way. And they're like, I'm not referring you to anybody. I would never want to work with you again. And I've never been told that, because I had good, I would say mentors, but good supervisors, good branch managers that I've worked under that have trained me up in the right way of just being open with people, and always just being upfront and realizing that sometimes that's going to cost you a deal. It's going to cost you, a transaction, because you're going to say, hey, this is what it's costing. This is the best we can do. And sometimes that's going to cost you, but that's still a much better route to take, rather than lying to someone to tell them what they want to hear.
Right.
You get them, 3 days before closing, and it's like, oh, actually, this is what it's going to be when you send them that closing disclosure. And now they're like, well, you didn't say any of this. It's like, yeah, but do you really want to walk away now? Because we're about to close in 3 days, and you're going to lose the house if you don't. So, it's definitely better, even realizing that it might cost you some business, always be honest. So.
Absolutely. I love that. The real estate and mortgage industry is full of so many bad actors. It's full of a lot of fraud. It's full of a lot of people who are not very ethical. They don't have a lot of high sense of morality. And so I think that agents like you and I can be a breath of fresh air to people, but it really depends on what they've been through that's going to determine how much they appreciate that honesty. Some people couldn't care less, but when you've been in the industry a while and you've seen people who, other agents who will literally lie to get the listing, or they'll, steal your client right out from up under you, or, they'll lie to get the sale done, lie to the buyer. I could have easily been like, oh no, there's no rental restrictions, or, do what you want to do. And because I really wanted the house to sell, but then I still got to sleep at night. So, I still have to answer for everything that I do. Yep. Eventually, I submit to a higher power, and that's just, it is what it is. And I don't have any time for my peace to be being disturbed, and I believe that you do reap what you sow. Now, sometimes bad things happen to you that you didn't necessarily sow. But in those moments, I believe that's when you have the right to demand justice, right? But other times when bad things happen to you and it's as a result of something that you did do, and you're just reaping the benefits of something that you have done, you kind of got to take it on the chin and just, rely on God's mercy to kind of get you through it. But we always want to be found on the side of right as much as possible. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a perfect way to wrap it up here. And so, no, thank you for bringing the topic forward on the HOA, because no, that was definitely eye-opening and allowed me to see the light. There's a shining light that is the good part of
home purchase.
Yeah, and I will say, if you are living in an HOA or if you are considering purchasing an HOA, realize that, again, most of the HOA community or committee are members of that community. So you can also seek to join your HOA association and affect the change that you want to see in your neighborhood. It's not like, oh, I move into this HOA, now I'm just subjected to whatever they say or tell me to do. It's like, no, you can be involved in your community that you live in, and you can have a say in whatever it is that goes on in the community, so that your voice can be heard, and you're not just a resident who's living there complaining about everything, but you're actually, stepping up and taking action to create the neighborhood that you want to live in.
Absolutely. I love that.
Cool. Well, with that, make sure you tune in next week, where we'll be back again for another episode. But until then, take care, be blessed, and we'll see you in the next episode.